Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Drumheller here with the Sharp app to go over the XFL Championship. It was a great inaugural season, and we are finally at the end. The XFL Championship goes off this Saturday night at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio on a neutral field at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And I can't wait for this matchup. It's been a fun season, but the DC Defenders have been the cream of the crop the entire season. So they're 6.5-point favorites against the Arlington Renegades. The Renegades are a team that I faded most of the year. They were the worst team against the spread in the regular season. But these two teams have two distinct paths to the championship that I think are really critical when we talk about handicapping this matchup. So let's dive right into it, right? The Defenders started off the season with 6 straight wins. They're the number 1 team in the XFL from start to finish, right? They look great all the way through. Towards the end of the year, they had a lot of close games. The defense kind of let up a little bit. They actually finished the year with one of the worst defenses in the XFL, but the offense is just the best across the board. So Jordan Tiamu, XFL Player of the Year, is the quarterback, and they've been dominating offensively. They put up a ton of points. They're 10-1 on overs this year. The over has been a wagon. But let's stick with the side here, and I'm going to explain to you guys why I'm laying the points with the Defenders. So these two teams played in Week 9. Arlington was a team that really struggled during the year under Bob Stoops. They couldn't figure out the quarterback position. They benched Drew Plitt early and went to Kyle Sloter. Kyle Sloter was awful. They ended up trading for Luis Perez from the Vegas Vipers, and he came in and solidified their quarterback position in the second half of the year, right? So Arlington has really been looking, better in the second half of the year, and then really looked their best in their playoff game last year against Houston, right? Now they're getting 6.5 points as a dog here to DC, but I like the Defenders, and I'm going to explain to you why here. We're getting them at a discount. These two teams played at Week 9. DC closed as a 10-point favorite and really dominated that game for 3 quarters. And I think that's really important when we're discussing these two teams. When DC had motivation, they were winning 26-9 throughout the first 3 quarters. And then they started, they were a little bit banged up at the end of the year. They started pulling Jordan Tiamu, who's, their starting quarterback, threw in De'Ara King, gave him some work, right? He comes down, they drive the ball down the field, running the ball. He throws a red zone interception. And then that sparks a comeback for the Arlington Renegades in that game, and they ended up reeling off 17 straight points, forcing overtime. Tiamu wasn't on the field at all in the fourth quarter. They brought him back in overtime, ended up getting the win, but it was a really close game, and I think that's kind of driving the price down here on DC, and that's why we see them as a 6.5-point favorite as opposed to a double-digit favorite that they closed, right? But I think that game was just more of a lack of motivation. We saw DC really dominate early in that game, and then they kind of left their foot off the gas late. I don't think that's going to happen here. We saw DC last week in their playoff game, really show probably their best game of the year against a Seattle team that I thought was the better football team. They were the better football team on paper from a net yards per play metric, and I really thought that Seattle was going to give them a challenge. DC ran away with it, 137-21. Really exploded offensively in the second half and ended up winning by margin by 16 points. So to me, that shows me that when DC wants to crank it up, even against their toughest competition, they can win these games by margin. So getting them at 6.5 to me is a discount. There's a couple other key factors that are going on here in this game. You look at the DC defense, and I really hammered them towards the end of the year because they really did get soft and let up a ton of yards. But it's hard to play defense. We see this in the NFL when your offense is so explosive and just scoring, whenever they touch the ball, right? When these two teams played in Week 9, DC scored touchdowns in 3 of their first 4 drives against the Arlington defense. So they're going to score points. They're going to move the ball here. It's just going to be a matter where Arlington can catch up. And I don't think they can, because I think if they're always having to trade touchdowns with DC, that's going to allow Greg Williams, the DC defensive coordinator, to really attack and a mobile quarterback on the other side in Luis Perez. Luis Perez is decent under pressure, but he's not really mobile. And Arlington, in that Week 9 matchup when these two teams played, had a 33.7 pass blocking grade on PFF, which is really not good. So I think now we have an extra week to prepare. I think Greg Williams is really going to have something schemed up that's going to give Luis Perez and the Arlington offense a lot of problems. I talked about that extra week off to prepare. Typically, I think when we see that in these types of games, it favors the better team. It favors the team that's more talented, and it favors the team with the more coaching staff, with the better coaching staff. And I think that's DC in both counts. DC, best team in the league, has the offensive player of the year, has the coach of the year, has the best running back in the XFL and Abram Smith. Lucky Jackson and Chris Blair averaged 15.9 and 22.3 yards per reception, right? So, Chris Blair, 22.3 yards per reception. So they're going to score a ton of points here, which, and kind of gets me comfortable with laying this number. It's 6.5 might seem like a lot, but I think DC can get the job done. And I think that's really a big part of it. It's just the explosive offense is going to force Arlington to really play from behind in this game. And even though they were able to do that in that Week 9 game, I think that was just a matter of DC letting up. So I did lay the points with the defenders. Let's talk about the total. 48's another high number, right? But DC has been an absolute wagon to the over. 10-1, 9-1 during the season, and again, 37-21 in the playoff game against Seattle. So that one, combined for 58 points. And I think, as long as Arlington can muster up some points and score in the teens, I think this one goes over. I think DC, they average close to 30 points per game. And I think they exceed that number here. I think they score in the 30s. So I would lean towards the over here, but it really depends, because if the game follows the same pattern as it did in Week 9 and DC gets out to a big lead, they don't have to score a ton of points. They can kind of lean on their running game and chew up some clock. There is a running clock in this league, so I think that matters. But I think the over is probably the side to go if we're going to play the total. So for me, it's going to be DC and over in the XFL championship. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Excited for the game, but I think that's how we play it. And let's, finish up the season on a winning note. Before we get out of here, though, I do want to give you another bet for the USFL. We're going to be transitioning over. We've been doing some USFL stuff on the website here at the Sharp app, firing off picks every week. So we're really starting to dive into that league. And it's a lot of fun because it's year 2 in that league. I think you're seeing better continuity from the offense, more explosive offenses, a lot more scoring, better kicking, just cleaner football than we saw in the USFL in Week 1. But I'm going to target a game, Michigan versus Pittsburgh, that goes off. And I love this game from a side total money line perspective. I think Pittsburgh wins this game outright as a dog. They're getting 3.5 points. I think they're the side there. They have the best defense in the USFL. They're allowing less than 20 points per game. And they've played all the top teams. They've played New Jersey, they played Birmingham, they played, New Orleans. So they played all the top teams in the league, and the defense still showing very well, right? So now they're playing a Michigan team whose offense has completely fell apart the past 2 weeks. They've, scored less than 14 points the past 2 weeks. And, Michigan offense looked good early, but they were playing Philadelphia. They were playing some teams with some softer defenses. So I think that is kind of artificially boosting the total up to 42 as well. In Pittsburgh's previous first 3 games, none of those totals exceeded 40. Their total got to 44 last week against Birmingham, but it was a 22-point fourth quarter. There was a lot of things that kind of went crazy in that game to push the total up that high. And Birmingham's one of the best offenses in the league. That's not what we have here with Michigan. So I like the under 42 in this one. And I like Pittsburgh on the side at plus 3.5. And don't be afraid to play a little bit of money line. This Pittsburgh defense is really good. Their offense is really ugly, but they want to win games by playing field position, running the football, and relying on that defense. And I think Michigan's going to allow them to do that just because of how they've been struggling offensively. They've been flipping quarterbacks with Carson Strong and Josh Love. They don't seem to have a lot of answers. So I don't think they're going to get the job done here. I think Pittsburgh gets the win. I think the game falls under the total of 42. So it's a little bonus bet for the USFL, but I'll be back next week giving you daily, weekly USFL picks right here at the Sharp app. Guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you get on the Sharp app, download the app, hop into free Discord, get used to all the tools, converse with our expert handicappers, always in there sharing information. We got channels for every sport, stuff's popping off. So come join the best sports gambling community over at the Sharp app, and I'll see you guys next week. Good luck on all your bets.